All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to True Crime Loser. I hope you're doing well. So, folks, I got a wild story for you today. I'm a sucker for end of the road show business stories. Show business is run by thieves and rapists, and by far the most brutal genre of show business, producing unbelievable amounts of comically bleak stories. It's a whole genre, is boxing. And then an even sadder, trashier subgenre to boxing is celebrity boxing or spectacle boxing, which is it's been around a long time. But spectacle boxing is having a moment right now with what the Paul brothers are doing. Except what the Paul brothers are doing doesn't have the bleak sadness that a lot of times accompanies celebrity boxing because they're young, they want to be there. It's not like they had some great first act of their career and something happened and now they're stuck doing this. When it gets sad is when the person doesn't want to be there, does not want to be boxing, would much rather be doing whatever else they were doing. But for whatever reason, something happened, money wasn't managed properly, and they find themselves, as they're getting on in age, in a boxing ring, getting their head smacked around while a drunk, bloodthirsty crowd yells, "Kill him! Kill him!" If I end up in 20 years out there taking boxing matches, like, I should have put ads on my channel, it didn't work out well for me. Just as an example of the genre, something like this. The title of this book is This Bloody Mary is the Last Thing I Own. A Journey to the End of Boxing. There's so many stories like this. Any YouTube video, documentary, anything that I can find in that genre, I've been all over it, and I'm telling you, out of all the stories I've come across, this one I'm about to tell you stands out as truly the stuff of nightmares. So let's get into it. I got to tell you about a couple people. The first person I'm going to tell you about is arguably the most corrupt, slimy boxing promoter of all time, and even to make the long list with that is saying something. And his name is Rick Parker. Everybody in the boxing world has a nickname, so his was Elvis. So Rick Elvis Parker. And Rick Parker at this time had an incredible mullet, full and healthy all the way down, just a remarkable mullet. Would normally wear these outrageous green suits with bright orange floral undershirts, maybe the bottom two buttons buttoned only, so bunch of chest, green suit, sunglasses to hide the effects of a maniacal cocaine addiction, mullet, corrupt as possible, Rick Parker. And how did Rick Parker end up being a coked out, corrupt boxing promoter wearing a green suit and a mullet? Well, before he did that, he would make a cleaning solution in his bathtub, which he would manufacture and bottle himself. He called it Sunsation, sun-sation, and he would go around door to door in Florida selling Sunsation. So I picture just a nice person in their house in Florida in the 80s reading the paper. Then all of a sudden the doorbell rings and they're like, I wasn't really expecting someone. And they open the door and it's a big, brooding, bloated man with a mullet selling homemade cleaning supply he made in his bathtub called Sunsation. And he made a lot of money selling Sunsation. It cost him pretty much nothing to make, and he sold the bottles for $49.99. I guess he would have days where he would make like $2,000 profit. Started dressing more flashy at this time, 50 grand in jewelry. There's a quintessential video clip of Rick Parker, and he's in his boxing gym. This is later when he becomes a boxing promoter, and everyone in there has workout clothes, and there's two men in the ring beating the hell out of each other, and it cuts to him, and he's got his hands on the rope, wearing his green suit, Rolex right in front of the camera, and he just really liked the flashy mullet look. And after he sold Sensation door to door, he wasn't loving that life, even though it was possibly the most profitable thing he ever did. After Sensation, then he became a corrupt music promoter, and then one day on a flight out of Las Vegas, he happened to sit next to, it's actually pretty wild to think about, another boxing promoter, very famous, also pretty corrupt, Don King. And long story short, Don King, to picture these two men talking to each other in a plane out of Vegas is just something. And Don King tells him, you can make all this money in boxing. Boxing promotion, there's a lot of money to be made, especially if you find a big white guy that has a name already and you can market it as this big spectacle. If they're a household name, you can make millions of dollars in one night and be out of there like a bank robbery. And Rick Parker really got fixated and fascinated with this idea of what he called the windfall, where you promote the right name, the right fight, and you just get everything, your whole dreams, everything you've ever wanted in that one night. You don't have to slog through some young boxer their whole career. Do it that way. He wanted the quick, easy money. And one of the first boxers that Rick Parker signed to his promotion was a guy named Tim Doc Anderson. So his nickname was Doc, so Tim Doc Anderson. And the deal they made is Rick Parker would pay Tim Anderson $750 a week. Tim could train as a boxer. When he wasn't training, part of that, he could do jobs for Rick Parker. He did some bodyguard stuff, and Rick Parker promised him, as you do these boxing matches, and also as my other boxers do their boxing matches, you'll get a portion of their fights, you'll get a portion of your fights, you're in the company, you're working for, Rick Parker Boxing Promotions, I'll give you your $750 a week and all this other money that you're getting from the other parts of the company, I'm going to keep in escrow for you. And people don't really know if maybe Rick Parker actually did keep Tim Doc Anderson's money in escrow, or if right around this time, sounds like Rick Parker's cocaine addiction really started to ramp up, jaw muscles pulsing, eyes bulging, mullet, green suit, like picture this man. And eventually, Tim Doc Anderson, who had been keeping very meticulous books of how much Rick Parker owed him, it got up to like $150,000, like actual real money. And Tim is hitting up Rick for the money, That's for a low-level boxer that never really had too much success. Tim needed the money, and Rick was dodging him. And just my speculation, if Rick was dodging one of his own boxers for $150,000, I would guess that the financial walls were closing in. Cokeheads are notoriously horrible with money. And he starts dodging and ducking Tim. And also, at this time, Tim's boxing career was on the outs. You realize that, okay, I'm not going to be world champion. I'm not going to be this. I would say one of the heights of Tim Doc Anderson's career was he boxed legendary boxer George Foreman. Remember? Came out with the George Foreman grill, the grill that everybody has and no one has used in 10 years. So George Foreman would later sell 10 million George Foreman grills, but at this time he fought, this is late 80s, he fought Tim Doc Anderson, he knocked Tim out, and George Foreman went on to have his legendary career. And Tim's career, you run into your limit as a boxer, and so you can imagine he probably wanted his 150 grand, and Rick Parker, his promoter, just didn't have it. And Rick Parker, after boxer after boxer that he signed didn't produce that big, huge, profitable payday for him. He started getting more desperate, started becoming more coked out, more corrupt. And I would say the pinnacle, the top of Rick Parker's promotion career was, remember George Foreman, the legendary boxer, the actual legit legendary boxer that came out with the grills. He had retired and was retired for 10 years. And Rick promoted his comeback fight, which comeback fights, after a boxer retires and is gone for 10 years, no one knows how are they going to come back and look old and slow? Is it going to come back a new, refreshed George Foreman? And I would say George Foreman's comeback after the 10 years could be described as the most successful comeback, especially of that long, 10 years, of any boxer in history. And he went on to win like 40 fights in a row or something crazy once he came back after being gone for that long. And so if he would have stayed with Rick through that whole comeback, Rick would have retired a unbelievably rich, respected, probably, boxing promoter. But the problem is Rick is not a top-tier boxing promoter. He's a second or third or maybe even fourth-tier, corrupt, coked-out boxing promoter with a mullet and green suit. So George Foreman does his first comeback fight with Rick, looks pretty good, then does maybe a couple more, and as soon as everybody sees, okay, this is a real comeback, this is going to produce a lot of real money, a top-tier boxing promoter just swooped in and took George Foreman from Rick Parker. Because any boxer that knew anything doesn't want to be with coked-out mullet and a green suit promoter. They want to be with the top-tier promoter. So once again, Rick Parker in his mind is going, that was my shot. I had it. I was the one that knew George Foreman was going to come back and look good. I took that risk, and I don't get any of the benefit for it. As soon as the real money starts rolling in, he was gone, sayonara, to a top-tier promoter. And he's probably, he at least still owes Tim Doc Anderson 150 grand. Surely he owes more people money. I think the walls were closing in. His addiction is just, he's blowing everything. And so his desperation for that big money payday at no matter the cost is getting really bad at this point. And he thinks he solved everything. He thinks he got a gift from the boxing gods when he meets former all-pro defensive end for the New York Jets, Mark Gastineau. And Mark Gastineau wasn't just an all-pro defensive end for the New York Jets. He was Defensive Player of the Year one year. Only one player gets it, pretty big deal. He had the record for the most sacks for one year. He did late night television. He's 6'5", 255 pounds, has a mullet himself, nice mustache, good-looking man. When he took off his football helmet and waved his mullet, everybody went wild. He did late-night TV. He was a name. He looked the part. He was big. He was white. And you gotta think that Rick Parker probably just was salivating at the thought of this. And so he meets Mark Gastineau, household name, football player. And Mark Gastineau, who had just retired from retired from football, wanted to get into boxing, and Rick was his new promoter. And so Rick, knowing that retired football players had boxed like legendary boxers on the way at the end of their career too, I'm sure he was thinking of in 1979, like 10 years before this, Lyle Alzado, a notorious roided out football player, boxed Muhammad Ali in Denver Mile High Stadium where the Denver Broncos played, and it was just a big spectacle of event, a giant, football player roided to the tits, boxes Muhammad Ali on the end of his career. Everybody made millions of dollars. It was successful. So you got to think Rick Parker, just coked out mullet, was thinking about that. Oh my gosh, millions of dollars in one night. And he had connections, remember, because he promoted George Foreman, the legendary boxer that came out with the grills. He promoted the comeback fights before another promoter swooped him away. So as soon as he had Gastineau, Mark Gastineau, the New York Jets football player, in his promotion, he immediately called George Foreman's business people, and he said, I'm sure it went something like this. He said, hi, Rick Parker here. You guys would not believe it. The all-pro defensive end, famous household name, big, tall, good-looking white guy, Mark Gastineau. Well, he joined the team and wants to box, and, Foreman is on the end. George Foreman's on the end of his career. We could probably all make like $3 million each one night and be out of there. And George Foreman's business people came back and said, all right, I assume it was something like this. If you get Mark Gastineau to a record of 12 wins and 0 losses, George Foreman will fight him. We'll do it. We'll do a big spectacle match. Everybody will make millions of dollars, and we'll do it. Because George Foreman was an actually respected, legendary boxer, so they got to look out for his legacy. So they didn't want to just... It doesn't look good for George Foreman's legacy if he boxes a brand new retired football player, with a 0-0 record. So just to make it look like something, they said, get him to a 12-0 record. And so Rick Parker, at the height of a cocaine addiction, mullet blowing in the wind, wearing a green suit, has a pretty interesting task in his hand, because he has this athletic, giant, good-looking man that wants to box, never boxed in his whole life, and he has to get that guy to a professional boxing record of 12-0, so then they can fight George Foreman, the guy that came out with the grills, and everybody can make life-changing money. So what could go wrong? Well, it needs to be talked about. Mark Gastineau could not punch. Remarkably, could not punch. You would think a man as athletic as he was and as big as he was, he got Defensive Player of the Year in the NFL. You would think that man could figure out one punch that would be good or dangerous for the opponent, even if it's just use his size and charge in with a slammerooski. But nothing he had as far as punching ability or boxing ability was dangerous to anybody. So that puts a big kink in the whole thing. How do we get this guy 12-0 professional boxing so we can get the big George Foreman payday? And so they didn't want to chance anything. So the first match that they booked was early 90s, and it was against a pro wrestler named Derek Dukes. And they sell out. The strategy for this whole to get him to 12-0 too was, let's do about one boxing match a month. We'll go around the country doing it in states with boxing commissions that are lax, that aren't going to give us too much hell, that aren't going to look into these people that Mark Gastineau is going to be fighting. And let's do it at, they didn't do it at like the big major cities that would have a bunch of eyes on it and media. They purposely kind of snuck around the country in these smaller cities, second-rate gymnasiums. They weren't playing the main nice arena in the state. They were these kind of B-level coliseums, a little bit dingy, past their prime. The whole goal was to get this whole 12-0 thing without that many people seeing it, that much media. And then once he gets to 12-0 and we can get the big George Foreman fight and get all the money, then who cares what happens? If Mark Gastineau gets splatted all over the canvas, so be it. At least Rick Parker's making the money, right? So the first one, small towns, dingy arenas, which has got to feel weird. People, pretty much everything that I've read about this story, people just gloss over this whole part where they say, they went out there and they fixed a bunch of fights for him, a bunch of easy fights, a bunch of people. But it is not easy to go out there and fake a boxing event. Like the first one, they sell out this whole arena. Everybody's there. Everybody bought a ticket with their hard-earned money because they want to see this guy, Mark Gastineau, who just was a real animal out on the football field. Now he's boxing? That's crazy. Is he going to be an animal in the boxing ring? Everyone wants to know. See what happened. They pay their hard-earned money. I picture Gastineau. He knows the whole thing is just a fraud. He's used to being in top quality football stadiums in New York City being celebrated, and all of a sudden he knows he can't box. I picture him sitting in a crappy, dingy locker room with his hands, gloved up. Can probably hear the crowd through the ceiling cheering, and he knows the whole thing is a scam. So the first fight is literally a pro wrestler, and the whole thing lasts 18 seconds. They tell the pro wrestler, don't even throw a punch. Get out of there as soon as possible. And so the fight starts. Ding, ding, ding. Gastineau charges the pro wrestler. Again, his punches are just sad. He does like three little The pro wrestler does a completely ridiculous, almost like Three Stooges level pratfall, like boop, and he flies back head over heels and lays on the canvas completely knocked out, while Gastineau is doing like a dance, like I just knocked him out. And you see Rick Parker jump in with his green suit on, and him and Gastineau hug each other. Well, already it started off on a horrible foot because it didn't look realistic. And so instantly on the first fight, they don't even get, now he's 1-0 technically, but the word on the street it's a fixed fight. It didn't look real. It's a federal offense to fix a fight. So the FBI starts investigating Rick Parker for federal offense of fixing a fight. Him and Gastineau are appearing in court. Gastineau's also appearing in court for a barroom brawl that he got into. So the whole, we got to make it to 12-0, and then all of our dreams come true really started with a rocky start. And so 1-0, already being investigated by the FBI, they had to make it look better, right? And so after that first one that just looked really fake, they started booking people that knew they had to take a fall, but they would say, you got to go in there and you got to let Mark Gastineau punch you up a little bit. It can't look too fake. And so they did this. It took about a year. They did about one a month all around the little small cities, trying to duck media, trying to just get the whole thing done without being made fun of or the media catching on that the whole thing was a scam. And from his first win to his ninth win, so he went 9-0, it was just absurd. One guy, he beat a boxer. The guy knew he was taking a fall, and then they needed someone else. So that guy that he beat said, my brother is a heavy crane operator. He's never boxed. He's not a boxer, but he'd probably do it for $1,000. So Rick Parker's like, yeah, get that guy. Imagine being a heavy crane operator. You're working on construction sites all day, and a coked out boxing promoter calls you up and asks you, do you want to fight former all-pro for the New York Jets, Mark Gastineau? And it's like, what? Like, think about getting that phone call. It's totally crazy. So he knocked out one guy, then he knocked out his construction worker brother. Another funny part is the fifth guy that he beat up, all these are fixed fights. The fifth guy that Gastineau beat up was Jimmy Baker, and then the next month, he knocked him out, and then the next month, he also knocked out Jimmy Baker. He just 2 months in a row. They must not have had another guy, so they're just like, just ask Jimmy Baker to do it again. So over a year, I picture Rick Parker captaining this circus scam boxing tour all over the nation, mullet blowing in the wind, and just the whole thing was a scam. I mean, a lot of times, right, the Gastineau's matches end so quick and they look so fake that everybody's booing, everybody spent their hard-earned money, and it's just a big scam. Imagine what it was like after those, and Gastineau goes to the locker room and he showers, and you meet up with a coked out Rick Parker afterwards, and he's going, this is going great, and Gastineau used to be celebrated for his actual accomplishments, and now he's ducking out of B-rate arenas before people can scream at him. Just the whole thing is a nightmare, but I'm sure Parker was just telling him, it's fine. Let's just get you to 12-0. No one will remember these. Okay, so a bad headline comes out about how you haven't boxed anyone real yet. Who cares? We get you to 12-0, and then the windfall. All of our dreams come through. So he gets him to 9-0. Honestly, it's a pretty impressive accomplishment even to get him that far. And as they're getting to 9-0, that fight, his ninth fight, was against a man that's like 6 inches shorter and 50 pounds lighter. Gastineau wins. He does this big dance, I'm really a boxer and I'm really impressive. And this fight was in Reno, Nevada, and the announcer that came in to interview Gastineau after his big win was very hard on Gastineau. He was asking tough questions like, are you going to box anyone real? Your past opponents, these aren't real boxers. And Gastineau hates I watched all the interviews around this. He doesn't even want to be a boxer. He doesn't want to be there. This is purely to make money, a big chunk of money after his football career. So you really can just tell he does not want to be doing this interview. And the announcer asking him questions goes, well, finally, you're in a real city here in Reno, Nevada, in front of the people, in front of the cameras. You've been kind of ducking around in these small cities. And Gastineau's just going, well, I'm from a small city, so the small cities work. He has all these ridiculous answers. But I would guess he's 9-0 at that point. Rick Parker, and they're so close, but they're feeling that the media is catching on, that the whole thing is a scam. So Rick Parker comes up with an idea for Gastineau's 10th fight that will maybe help all that. And what he wants to do is book, remember Tim Doc Anderson, one of the first people that Parker signed. He had the $750 a week and to be the bodyguard and to train, and eventually he owed him $150,000, which he still hasn't paid. Well, Rick Parker thinks, okay, Tim has fought George Foreman before, the legendary boxer that we're trying to get Gastineau to get to for the big payday. He fought George Foreman. Doc Parker is also a legitimate boxer. So what we'll do for your 10th fight is I'm going to book Mark Gastineau, the football player, against Tim Parker. We'll get Tim to lose on purpose. We'll make sure it's fixed. And then they can't say, that you haven't fought anyone real, because Tim Anderson is a very real boxer, and we'll also get a headline after you beat Tim Anderson. We'll get Tim to come out in the media and say, I've boxed George Foreman and Mark Gastineau, and Mark Gastineau punches harder. That will get everybody's imaginations going. He'll be 10-0. We'll do one more fight for 11-0, and then, or I guess two more fights. We'll do two more fights for 12-0, but you'll right there, it's already getting the promotion started with the whole he punches harder than George Foreman, and we'll be on our way. So Rick Parker books Tim Anderson. They sign the contract. All right, you're going to fight Mark Gastineau. And after, and this shows you kind of how they would go about fixing the fights or telling the person, you got to lose, is they got it all signed first, and then Rick Parker with Mark Gastineau with him would make it harder to say, no, I'm not going to do a fixed fight if it was just Rick Parker. But Gastineau and Rick Parker go to Tim Anderson, and I would assume the conversation went something like this. Tim, we're putting on these shows. Mark Gastineau is a big name from his football career. People are showing up. They're big fans of him. They want to see him get a big knockout. You and I both know, Tim, that your legitimate boxing career ended years ago. It's not going to hurt your record to have one more loss on your record. So if you wouldn't mind, we're paying you much more than you would have ever have gotten paid during your legitimate boxing career. But if you wouldn't mind, just play along. We're putting on a show for the fans. If you just go out there, have some fun, let Mark Gastineau land one of his terrible-looking punches on you at a certain point. Don't go down too quick so everybody boos us out of the arena, but at a certain point, just flop over. Look, you're going to get paid handsomely. No one's going to get hurt. We're putting on a little show for the fans. If you could just play along, that would really help us. We're trying to get him to 12-0, and we're going to do George Foreman's business people said we're getting the Foreman fight. We're going to make life-changing money. And Tim, who, again, is sitting there listening to the pitch with Gastineau right there, and, Tim making the pitch, probably jaw muscles pulsing. Tim said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to knock you out, Gastineau. And so this was the first time that someone wasn't playing along. Usually they would come in, hey, you're a little starstruck by Gastineau here, and people go, oh yeah. Tim said, no, you need to pay me the money you owe me. You owe me $150,000. I want the money you owe me, and don't forget, you promote me too. I'm still a boxer under you. Why do I have to lose? I know I can beat Gastineau, and I'm knocking him out. And Parker and Gastineau were livid. I mean, imagine Parker just going, what? I've put together, it took me a year to get him to 9-0. We're so close to getting this fight. Your career's over, Tim. You're not going to be a world champion. You're not going to be anything. So just, why can't you play along? And I'm sure Mark Gastineau is thinking, oh, God, this guy can box. Imagine Gastineau trying to sleep that night knowing that it's not just going to get to go like this and the person flops over and plays dead. Leading up to that fight, I'm sure Mark Gastineau was extremely nervous. He can't box, and now he has a boxing match booked with a boxer. And the night of the match comes, and Tim Doc Anderson beats the crap out of former all-pro defensive end Mark Gastineau. And you could tell Gastineau had never even been hit really hard, because at one point Tim just comes over and just snaps Gastineau's head like a true power punch to the head. And Gastineau looks at the ref with his hands down, not even like up, with his hands down, like, hey, do something. And the ref is just making sure there's no fouls. They don't help you in that situation. And Mark Gastineau just gets beat around the ring and finally slammaroo, hands down again, looks at the ref, and then one more power shot completely flattens Gastineau on the, beat to hell on the canvas. And with that, the chance of the big George Foreman fight, their dreams of making millions of dollars in one night, the windfall, everything is over. And Rick Parker is absolutely livid, hits the roof, and can't get over it, really, and thinks, okay, well, now he's got a loss. He refuses to think the whole thing is done. So now the plan to try to salvage the big George Foreman fight, and you got to think, people, it's just getting sad at this point. The addiction and the corruption, and the walls are closing in on Parker, and he's so desperate to make all this money. And so he figures, all right, let's fix 2 or 3, 4, whatever it is. We'll do a couple more just scam boxing bouts for Gastineau, get him a couple more wins, and then I'll book another Tim Anderson so he can avenge the loss. His one loss, now he avenged it. And then maybe if he avenged the loss, and now the plan is just getting far-fetched and desperate, but they're thinking if we can just get him a couple more wins, and then he boxes Tim Anderson again, the one loss, then we can get the big money payday. So that's what they do. They fix a bunch more fights. It's just getting sad and really desperate at this point. And then he approaches Tim Anderson again. And everybody in Tim Anderson's life is saying, don't do it. Don't be a part of anything that Rick Parker is doing. It's not safe. And Tim Anderson is going, it's all right. Rick Parker told me he doesn't want to work with Gastineau anymore. He said that, it's over, but there's a clause in Gastineau's contract that says if he loses one more fight, he doesn't have to work with him anymore. So he's bringing me in to basically knock out Gastineau and end this crazy ordeal that they've been doing for a year and a half. And Tim Anderson's family and friends, again, is going, don't work with Rick Parker. It's not smart. And Tim Anderson goes, well, I'll be really careful. I'm going to bring my own water jug, make sure no one tampers with it, and I'm going to bring my own corner man, my own coach that's going to make sure to look out for me. And they're going, okay, we don't think it's a good idea. So the night of Tim Anderson versus Mark Gastineau, the Revenge 2, the second time they fought, it's the night of, and the cornerman, Tim Anderson's coach that was supposed to be flown in, is not there. And so he's got his own jug of water, which he's telling himself, okay, stay away from Rick Parker. Poisoning in boxing is a thing, has been a thing. And so he's guarding his water, and all of a sudden he's in the ring, he's warming up, he's got the cornerman and coach that he doesn't know, and just makes a horrible, stupid mistake. He was even thinking to not do it. One of them said, as he's warming up, handed him a cup of water, and he grabbed it, not even thinking, and chugged it. And the water tasted warm and sweet. And the match was supposed to kind of get going. The time it was supposed to start came and went, and 40 minutes went by, and there was no Mark Gastineau. And by the time the boxing match actually started, Tim Anderson, who had drank the warm, sweet water on accident, was feeling very nauseous and very tired and even starting to hallucinate. And so people think that 40 minutes were supposed to start maybe was for the poison that he accidentally drank to set in. And by the time the match starts, poor Tim Anderson is in a really bad way. He's literally out there hallucinating, nausea, truly a bleak situation to be in. I mean, think, where else are you going to hear something like that? Some guy poisoned, fighting a man much bigger than him while he's hallucinating, and he couldn't barely see. He couldn't do anything, let alone box. And it took Mark Gastineau 6 rounds, but eventually he landed with, all of his weight, a big punch on Tim Doc Anderson and knocked Tim out cold, where he laid on the mat for 5 minutes straight. So anytime somebody gets knocked out cold and doesn't wake up for 5 minutes, that's a very serious concussion, and that person should be driven to the hospital immediately. Well, Tim was picked up and he was brought back to the dingy, crappy locker room where he vomited violently, which is another, even if you're not poisoned, that's another symptom of a very bad concussion where you should be taken to the hospital immediately. But he was laid in the locker room and, in my opinion, left for dead. No one went in there and checked on him. Rick Parker, I guess, told everybody, don't go in there. I think what they did is they thought that he would die from the poisoning. It would get chalked up to being killed from the knockout. When a boxer dies, they go into the record book. It's like 2 sentences. Killed or collapsed in the locker room, died 2 days later. So they probably thought that if, he would die, it would get chalked up as just, he got hit in the head really hard and then died. But Tim didn't die. He was discovered hours later by a janitor. Picture a janitor going in there, everybody's left, he's cleaning up, and you go into the locker room, and a boxer, still gloved in the shorts, is collapsed on the floor in a pile of his own puke. I mean, it doesn't get any more bleak than that. The janitor's just poking him like, you all right, man? And for the next 2 years, Tim Doc Anderson just went through health problem hell. Had to go on, do treatments for vertigo, could barely get out of bed, horrifying weight loss, didn't have an appetite, went to doctors, and they were telling him, you were poisoned. We need to know exactly what it was in order to come up with a treatment to counterbalance whatever it is. We don't know. So he was getting all these treatments, but nothing was really working that well. It was just 2 years of being in bed, being nauseous. He was going to come out with a book at that time. His boxing career is obviously over, and he was going to write a book, and I think Tim Anderson was, and I think it was going to be called Liars, Cheaters, and Whores. Sounds promising. I probably would have gotten it. But Rick Parker hears from across town, they're back in Florida at this point, hears from across town that Tim Anderson is going to write a book called Liars, Cheaters, and Whores, and he hits the roof knowing that probably the poisoning and the way that he treated Tim Anderson would make it into the book. So Rick Parker, also because I think he was worried he was going to get taken to task for the poisoning, Rick Parker sent 2 goons with baseball bats to rough up an already weak, sad Tim Anderson. And every time throughout this time that Rick Parker's goons would threaten Tim Anderson, the big crux of the threat was, we are going to kill, if you come out with this stupid book, if you tell anyone, if you think you got poisoned and you want to go to the police, your quadriplegic sister will be killed. And allegedly, at one point, the goons handed Tim pictures of his quadriplegic sister sitting on the porch of her house with the kid sitting there like, we know where she lives. We will, and it was like over, that was like his go-to threat. We're going to kill your quadriplegic sister. And the reason his sister was a quadriplegic is because of a tragic traffic accident when she was 16. So at this point, not even Gastineau will return Rick Parker's calls. It's really late stage coke addiction. Gastineau, and it never got the George Foreman fight. He did a cup after he beat a poisoned Tim Anderson. He had a couple more fixed fights, and then the highest they could get, the biggest payday, is he boxed another retired football player. So that was the big spectacle that they could sell tickets. See, one football player box another football player. It not even close to the money as if they would have fought George Foreman. And that football player was named Alonzo Highsmith. They did the boxing match in Tokyo, Japan. It was Gastineau's last boxing endeavor, and it was one of the saddest ones you've ever seen. Alonzo Highsmith, the football player that he was boxing, actually could box and punch really naturally and really hard. And it ended with, if I'm Mark Gastineau, he turned his back on Alonzo, the guy's boxing. So Alonzo's behind me. He went to the rope. So the rope's right here. He leaned over the rope, putting his head as far out of the ring as possible. And then he put one arm up like this to try to like block, I guess. So, I mean, you can't do that. Just go to the ropes and like lean over with your head. And so Alonzo, the guy's boxing, is behind him, kind of just like, what do I do? And it's just so pathetic that the ref comes in and waves the whole thing off. And just like that, Mark Gastineau's incredibly pathetic boxing career comes to an end. I'm sure he wanted nothing to do with coked out Rick Parker at that point. Tim Anderson's health is declining, and eventually, this is a couple years after he was poisoned, a doctor tells him, you need to find out what you were poisoned with exactly, or you're going to wither away and die. We need to know. You got to figure it out. And so Tim Anderson says, okay, and he buys a gun and a tape recorder, and he calls Rick Parker. I'm sure they hadn't talked in a while, and he lies to Rick Parker and says that he has He has basically a book deal where he's writing a book, and the producer of the book will pay Rick Parker a bunch of money if Tim Anderson can go out, meet with them, talk about it. And Rick Parker was so desperate for money at that point that he accepted, and they agreed to meet at a hotel in Orlando, Florida. Rick Parker brought his son and his wife. Tim Anderson met him there. They all talked and reminisced for a little bit, and then after things seemed to be going good, Rick Parker's son and wife took a walk, and so now in the hotel room is just Tim Anderson and Rick Parker. Remember, Rick Parker poisoned Tim. They've had this whole boxing career. He's owed him money for years. I mean, a tumultuous relationship. And Tim lays it out. He pulls out the tape recorder and says, here's the truth. Rick, my health has declined from whatever you gave me. All I need to know is what is it so I can get on an actual treatment for it. I'm gonna die. I'm withering away. You gotta help me. I haven't felt good in years. Please. And Rick hit the fan. He grabbed the tape recorder, threw it across the room. It hits the wall, explodes. He says, for this stunt that you pulled with the tape recorder and asking me these questions, that's it. I'm going to kill your sister. That's it. He made the same threat that he had made a bunch of times over the years. And Doc Anderson, pulls out the gun, shoots Rick Parker 6 times, reloads, shoots him 2 more times, calls 911, turns the gun on himself. The gun jams, it won't fire. When the law enforcement gets there, he hands over the gun, completely cooperates. He says, I'm going to just completely cooperate, get this over with. I want the death penalty. Doesn't get the death penalty, and as I'm sitting here telling you the story, Doc Anderson is doing life in prison in Florida for killing Rick. I blew the name, the final thing, Rick Elvis Parker. And I was thinking, I wonder if Rick Parker with his mullet, as he lied there dying in the Florida hotel room, I wonder if he thought, gee, just for a second, like, I should have just kept selling sensation door to door. And that, my friends, is one of the saddest, most bleak boxing stories I've come across. I hope you're doing well. Happy New Year. It's good to be back. I love you all. Why? Stiven why? Shamita.